and welcome back to my channel. My name is Sim Kern, pronouns they, them. I'm an author, a journalist, a booktuber, and today I'm going to be talking to you about doing revisions. So I have been working for the last few weeks on revisions for my novel Seeds for the Swarm, which is going to be published in fall of 2020. And I'm working through the feedback from my editor. My revisions are due January 1st, but I know once my kids are on holiday break, I'm not gonna get anything done. So I'm scrambling to finish them in the next week and a half. I'm confident that I'm gonna meet the deadline because I only have about 10 chapters left, and I'll probably do one more quick read through, and then I'll be sending those revisions off to my editor. So this is a book I've been working on. I actually started writing it 7 years ago in 2013. I wrote about 20,000 words, none of which are still in the book, before I kind of lost steam and gave up and life got too busy again. Didn't touch it again for 4 more years after that. And then after my daughter was born, I lost my job because I had some medical injury issues. Then I started writing again and I finished the novel. It looks very different than that first draft did. I've been through rewriting it completely on my own after querying and not getting much response. Then when I found an agent, that agent wanted heavy revisions at first, got a new agent who wanted some different revisions, went on sub. Now I have my editor. Luckily, my editor really likes where it's at and there aren't too many big changes happening. It's been a lot of little fiddly tweaking things, but I've been on quite a revisions journey with Seeds for the Swarm. And so I wanted to share with you kind of my process and some of my tips for going about revising an entire novel, although many of them will also apply to like revising a short story or something, in case that's helpful for any of you. So I've got 8 general principles here that I'll go over. And I'm sorry for the frog in my throat. I'm still getting over a bit of a cold, not COVID. The first thing is to know what type of revisions pass are you on, and be purposeful about what you're doing as you're doing a pass. And by a pass, I mean like a read through of your book or your story with the purpose of revising it and making it better. So it's already drafted and now you're going about trying to fix it. One big thing is pace. Sometimes you want to do a binge revision where you are speeding through the book and you do it in like a day or two and you're not fixing big things. You're just skimming over the surface because you want to see how does everything kind of hang together? How does that stuff in chapter 3 connect to the stuff in chapter 20? So sometimes you want to go fast, and there's value in going fast because you just kind of want to get a sense of the whole thing, how it's working together, experience it the way a reader experiences it, which is reading it pretty quickly, not spending hours laboring over each paragraph, right? And then there's the slow, catch everything, analyze every word kind of pass. And you can't do those two at the same time. Those are 2 different passes. Something else to keep in mind is, are you self-revising, in which case you kind of have to be your own editor, or are you responding to feedback from a beta reader or an editor? Those are different types of passes. And another thing is, where are you at in the revisions process? Is this a developmental revision where you want to possibly move pieces of the book around, change entire chapters, change entire plot lines? Or is this a fine-tuning pass where you're just kind of getting some of those scenes to flow a little better or adding a bit more description here and there? So kind of know what you're setting out to do with each pass and keep kind of focused on those goals until you finish the entire pass. I think that's helpful rather than trying to do a million different things at the same time. So the second thing is, if you are not self-revising but responding to feedback from an editor or a beta reader, it is very important to let the feedback sit. So when we are told that our words could be better, there's like a flinch that happens there, right? There is an ego flinch. And no matter how long I've been writing, no matter how many workshops I've been in, and because I was an undergrad creative writing major, no matter how many beta readers I've had or editors, I've published a book at this point, fairly used to getting lots of criticism or suggested changes. But there's still, every single time, this little flinch the ego does. And you're not going to see clearly while you're kind of still in that flinch. So when I first got my revisions back from my editor, the first thing I did was just read them. Just read them and don't act on them. So I read through every comment she made on my entire manuscript and didn't allow myself to touch anything or respond to anything or fix anything in the moment. I just read them. And then I let it sit for like a week before I started in going back through chapter by chapter and actually fixing stuff. Because when I was reading through it that first time, I was experiencing that flinch over and over, like, oh, she doesn't understand this, or why does she want me to do that, or this and that. You know, the mind sort of rebels against the criticisms. And once you give it time to sit, you'll find you actually agree probably with most things if they're a good editor, if their notes are worthwhile. Even as I'm going through it now, doing the sort of deep dive chapter by chapter, I can't tell you how many times I'll be like, you know what, I'm gonna ignore that comment. I have a good reason for doing what I did there. And then half a page later, going, oh, crap, she's right. And then going back up, fixing what she wanted me to and resolving the comment. So even in the moment, even after you've like read through everything one time, you let it sit, you think your ego's out of the way, even as you're going through the revisions process, you're going to find that little flinch, and you have to sometimes give it a second, give it a page, and then come back and say, you know what, maybe this really is confusing for the reader. Because if your editor knows what they're about, if they have experienced some sort of issue with your story there, they have an issue there, and other readers probably will too. So, hopefully you're working with an editor you trust. You should, if you're publishing a book, you should trust your editor. Unless you guys have very different visions, in which case maybe you shouldn't be publishing with them. That's gonna make me skip ahead I'm gonna skip ahead to one I had planned, which is the next thing I wanna talk about was when should you take feedback and when is it okay to say no? So, I take probably 90+% of the suggestions my editors made. Actually, probably well over 95%. But there are some times where once in a while, I stick to my gun and I'm like, no, I really like this here. I really like it the way I have it. And I have a good reason why. Sometimes your rationale for putting something somewhere, maybe your editor didn't understand your rationale. And sometimes it's just a matter of style. So if your editor is saying that anything is confusing, or they feel like they need more description here, they're not seeing it clearly, they're not feeling the emotions clearly, add those things in. If they're saying, we can cut this, we can lose it, they're probably right. But it may be that you just have a difference in style and both of your ideas are sort of legitimate. So one thing I ran into today was there's a section where I'm doing sort of a time is passing paragraph, right? So it's just sort of an expository time passes paragraph. My editor said, well, why can't you just jump ahead to the next scene and incorporate some of this backstory into that scene? It's a comment she's made a couple places in the manuscript, and I took her advice there. But on this one, I really liked the flow of this paragraph. And personally, I don't need a book where it's always action, 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 scene, scene, scene. Sometimes I like a nice restful expository paragraph, a little bit like, here's what happened in November, I recall reading and enjoying those types of passages in literature that I read. And so I kind of stuck to my guns on this and was like, no, I actually really like how this particular bit came out, and I don't want to change it. And I think it's more of a stylistic difference than, one person's right, one person's wrong. Really, when you stick to your guns, think about, do I have a good reason to do this? Can I articulate the reason why I'm doing this to my editor? Can I explain, like, look, if I scene this out, it's going to add a lot. It's going to make this section a lot lengthier. I'm trying to get from this plot point to that plot point. It's got a nice flow to it. Let's keep it the way it is. Can you explain that? Or is it just, are you just having a knee jerk, like, I wrote it, so it must be perfect kind of moment? You want to avoid that. If you can't articulate why you have it the way you do, and why you think your editor is wrong, then you should probably go with their suggestions. Another time that it would be good to not take feedback is if you fundamentally disagree with where the person's coming from. I feel like this is going to happen less with a trusted editor and more with maybe just a random beta reader you found in a critique group or something, and they're suggesting things that are not aligned with your vision philosophically. example, one time in a workshop that I took here in Houston, it was like an adult amateur writer workshop. A fellow workshopper wrote, "Why is she Asian?" about one of my characters, and thought that having a queer Asian character was like too complicated for a story. So that is not good feedback, I thought. So you can obviously ignore, stuff like that. My next suggestion is to set goals for yourself. Revising a book is a pretty overwhelming process, and it's also possible to just get bogged down and lost and do it forever. So depending on your project or your working style, you might set goals around simply time. Like I'm gonna do this much each day. If what you're having, I would recommend that kind of goal is if you're having trouble sticking with it. If you really don't like revising and you're, feeling overwhelmed by the process, just set a goal. I'll spend 20 minutes a day. I'll spend an hour a day, whatever you have, on the project, and don't get too stressed about how much you're getting accomplished. On the other hand, if you're like me and you're working towards a deadline, you need to break down how long your book is and decide, okay, what is a manageable amount I can do each day in order to finish it for my deadline. So right now I know if I do 3 chapters a day, then I will finish on time. And sometimes if I have steam and I have extra time left over, I'll do 4 or 5 chapters a day, even if I'm on a roll. Today I did 4, so feeling pretty good about that. The next point is to save yourself time by making it easy to navigate your document. And for this, I highly recommend writing a book that has chapters and chapter names. Even if you don't want the final book to have names, just name each chapter something that will help you remember what's in it. That way, if you're like, oh, where is that scene where, because as you're fixing something on page 235, you might need to foreshadow it on page 17. And so in order to be able to find things quickly in your book, you want to be able to find things quickly in your book. Which means in a Word document, use the headings feature so that when you're in the navigation pane, you can see actually a list of your chapters and just click on the chapter to navigate right to it. That'll save you a ton of time. And again, I recommend giving each chapter descriptive headings. For my other book, the one that's not on sub yet, Free People's Village, that one has a mixed up chronology. So actually instead of chapter headings, it has dates. But sometimes, just for the purposes of revising, I threw in descriptions of what's happening on those dates for myself to be able to find things in the document. Those will probably get deleted before I'm sending the book out, on sub. Make it easy to navigate. I don't know how it works in Scrivener, but definitely use technology to shorten the amount of time you find just trying to find where that one part in the book was. That's another thing, which is do fix those things as they come up. If you get to page 70 and you realize that means you need to fix something back in chapter 3, don't wait until the end of the book to go back and make those fixes. Fix plot continuity as you go, because you'll probably forget later on. And also that means to have a notes app or a notepad that you bring with you when you're out in the world, because when you're in the revisions process, things will occur to you in the most inconvenient places that you need to change. Oh my God, I think I changed the hair color of this one character from chapter 4 to chapter 7. I need to go back and fix that. So you want to be able to make a note of those things and do it in the moment when it occurs to you, because that little thought bubble might not come back to you again. The next thing is when you're getting ready to do your revisions, it's really important to set up your environment. I find even more than with drafting, I get sucked into revisions. I get very deep in it because your brain is doing a lot. Your brain is trying not just to write the damn thing, but to pretend you're cosplaying as a reader too. You're trying to trick your brain into seeing this for the first time. So you're trying to pretend to be a reader and a writer at the same time. And that's a lot of layers. And I get very sucked in doing that. So I can really easily lose track of time. I need to set alarms to make sure that I pick my kids up from school on time and don't just revise and then they're standing outside of school where is mommy, right? So definitely set up your environment so that you will be comfortable as you get sucked into the world, and you can get sucked into the world. For me, that means turning my Wi-Fi off. It means I don't revise in coffee shops. I can draft in coffee shops And in fact, the sort of music and people distracting me from time to time can be sort of helpful. But for revisions, I need like total silence. I do it here in my office at home. I also like have a bad back, so I have like my heating pad on and ready to go, and I have to have my tea and snacks with me. That's another thing. Take care of your body while you're revising. Set timers to like take a break or in between chapters, get up and stretch, have some snacks with you. Because again, it's very easy to get like sucked in and neglect yourself. And then if you're neglecting yourself, you're going to be getting grumpy. And then when you're reading your editor's comments, you're going to be feeling grumpy and not as generously towards your editor's comments, and you're going to feel that flinch, and your ideas aren't going to be as good and as fresh. So that's the next piece of advice. Take care of your body. Make sure you're eating and drinking and getting stretch breaks and exercise so that your revisions are like at your very peak of performance mentally, right? The next one is kind of become like, it's like a tried and true thing. I've never done it before until now, but this book, because I have been working on it for 6 years and I have looked at it so many dang times, I put it all in Comic Sans to revise it, because your brain remembers the way it looks in Times New Roman. Like my brain got so used to the way the paragraphs look and the way I know they're supposed to make me feel in Times New Roman, that putting it in Comic Sans, because it changes the kerning and it changes where the lines break, it'll really throw you off, and it helps you encounter the text anew, right? Pretending like you're a reader again and encountering the text anew. That's what you want in a revisions process. So I am doing the Comic Sans trick, and it is working. So try that. Put your whole document in Comic Sans and read it again and see how it strikes you. I bet you'll find some things you didn't catch the first time around. The last thing is to not rush it, to take your time and trust the process. I know you've like written this whole book and you're so excited to get it out there and go on your journey, but publishing is slow and it takes a long time. And the revisions process is probably the most important part, actually, maybe even more than the actual drafting of the novel, because most drafts are trash. This is now your time to make it shine, make all the characters come alive, make sure the plot makes sense and the tension is consistent throughout, and you're keeping the stakes high, and all the all the philosophical underpinnings and the themes are coming through, and the imagery is vivid and striking, and like, this is it. This is the time to make it shine, and you don't want to rush that process. You want your book to be in the very best possible shape it can be before your next step, whether it's starting to query, going on sub, self-publishing, or sending it off to your editor for final printing. So those are my advices. That's my advice for doing your revisions for your novel. As you can see, I've been doing revisions all day, so my brain is not working so good. So those are my tips for working on revisions. Please let me know if you have any other questions in the comments, and what other topics you'd like me to take on related to writing and publishing and fixing up books to get them ready to sell out in the world. I hope you're all having a wonderful December. I hope it's colder where you are than where we are, because it's 80 degrees here, which is really depressing. But I'll see you next time, and like and subscribe, because that helps me. And why not help a fellow writer out? All right, take care. Bye.